Welcome back to another episode of the Capes and Tights podcast right here on capesandtights.com. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg. This is Horror Week. We're in Horror Week here at the Capes and Tights podcast, and this episode is brought to you by Galactic Comics and Collectibles, galacticcomicsandcollectibles.com. But this is CJ Leede returning to discuss her upcoming novel, American Rapture from Tor Nightfire, which comes out October 15th, 2024 at bookstores everywhere. But CJ is also the horror writer and author of critically acclaimed Maeve Fly, and was one of our favorite books of 2023 in the upcoming American Rapture, which is hitting shelves, like I said, October 15th, which has the running to be one of the best books of 2024 as well. So check this episode out featuring author CJ Leede talking American Rapture right here on the Capes and Tights podcast at capesandtights.com. Enjoy, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. How are you today, CJ?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. It's been, you've been on, technically, it was actually earlier in this year, but it was at the very beginning of the year. And so we thought we'd return to discuss your latest book that's coming out here in October, American Rapture. But what's the past 12 months been like? I mean, you had your Maeve Fly released, and then the paperback came out, and now American Rapture's coming out. I mean, has it been a whirlwind, or what's it been like?
It's been wild. I feel like my life has really changed, honestly. But it's been amazing. I feel like I've made so many friends, and this community, it's sort of astounding to me, like how many people there are who love horror, who, I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise, but just who are so kind of like welcoming and show up for each other with the other authors. Like fine folks like you, readers, all types of people. It's been a really cool experience. But yeah, it's crazy. I don't even know where I am half the time.
Do you feel it's like when you have a book come out, not exactly a year apart from each other, but close to it, do you feel like you didn't even get a break from promoting Maeve Fly? Now you're into American Rapture?
Yeah, kind of. And the way it happened for me is that I actually got I sold some foreign rights after Maeve came out, or kind of like after we sold Maeve. So there was a second tour in Europe, which was amazing. And I ate so much pasta, it was crazy. But it really, yeah, it's kind of been like one after the other. My third book, actually, we kind of pushed it back. So there's going to be a little more time in between this one and the next one.
Was that any reasoning behind that other than the fact that you need to kind of like breathe, or is it just,
Oh
you're still
no,
ready?
I'm just so fucking slow on this one that I think it feels like an important book to me, hopefully. So I like really want to get it right.
Mhm. That makes sense. I mean, I appreciate that. I mean, we all want the best, as a reader or fans or people that want your publisher, obviously yourself, you want to have the best quality product putting out there or thing out there. And so taking extra time, I think no one really, is gonna complain about that.
Sweet. Well, sorry if anyone does.
Exactly. That's personal problems for them. That's, whatever. We're the ones thankful enough that people are writing stuff that we like. And so I think that we're all worth it. And plus there's so much shit out there. Let's be honest. Like there's
Yeah.
so many talented authors right now writing such amazing horror books that you don't stand like, sorry to say, but you're not on an island here. You're not the only
Yeah.
writing. And so like, we got to find time to read other shit too. We can't just be like, oh, we're waiting for CJ's next book. We have to, it's nice to have that extra time, that leeway in there. I mean, Stephen Graham Jones screwed us this year by coming out with 2 books in one year. So, there's that.
It's crazy. And Teenage Slasher was so freaking good. I cannot wait for Buffalo Hunter Hunter. Dying to read it.
Absolutely. I've already put my request in. I was like, okay, when those arcs come in October, can you please send me one? Because I'm really interested in that book. But yeah, so like having this gap between it is fine to me, in my opinion. But I just talked to Daniel Kraus a couple of weeks ago because we did another beer. My brewery did another beer with him for
Oh,
Pay the
sweet.
Piper. And so we talked, and I was like laughing because he almost like not forgot, but it was almost like a secondary thing. Like, oh wait, Whale Falls paperback release comes out like a couple of days after Pay the Piper came out, or a week after. And I was almost laughing because I'm like, you're so like into the next book that you're even forgetting your paperback release is coming out.
Yeah, I think that's kind of how it is like, and even with Maeve, like I sold Maeve 2 years before it came out. So when it did come out, I had to reread it to know like what anybody was talking about. And even American Rapture now, I'm like, man, maybe I need to like brush up a little bit because it's your head just gets in this new space. It's really interesting.
Someone's like, oh, so this happened in the book. Wait, I wrote that in the book? Really? That's what I did?
That, but you know what? That feeling I think is like really, I don't know if other writers experience this, but anytime I read my work, I'm like, wait, I wrote this. That's fucking crazy. Just because you're in such a particular
Yeah.
headspace at any
Mhm.
given time, and writing a book and finishing it will kind of like, at least for me, like it has like changed me each time, like I almost like let go of stuff I'm working through and kind of leave it in the book. So
Mhm.
sometimes I'll read it and I'll be like, oh boy, like, yikes, I was really going through something there.
Exactly. Spilled it out on there. But so, as you know, and as people who listen to this podcast know, that was a huge fan, or am a huge fan of Maeve Fly. That followed up completely the same with American Rapture. I was absolutely enamored by American Rapture. So I'm so happy that you're actually taking the time out to come on here and talk, because it is the perfect follow up, in my opinion, to Maeve Fly. You didn't even skip a beat. It drew me in from the very beginning and kept me going, even through some pretty gut wrenching and heart wrenching moments, even throughout this novel. But what how have you been describing American Rapture? You probably did that last time you were on, because we kind of like pitched the idea that it was coming out and you should pre-order it. But like, how do you describe American Rapture to people when they ask you about it?
Um, I'm trying to get more succinct with it, but basically, I say that a very sheltered 16-year-old Catholic girl is coming into her sexual awakening or the beginning of it at the same time as the world or America kind of explodes with this very violent, sexually propagating virus. It's also like it's kind of a retelling of like it's all Dante's second circle of hell and all about kind of lust and sin and shame and guilt in the church and otherwise.
So now you have all kinds of people hating on you right now, because you brought in the Catholic Church in there and the church in there, and people are now going to hate on you for that too now. Okay.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's funny. I've had hate for other things in the book, but not that so far,
Really?
weirdly. Yeah, but I just wonder if like those are not really the people reading my
Yeah,
book.
exactly.
This will be interesting with my family, this one. I think we'll see what happens.
Are you okay, CJ? Is everything okay? Your house? Is everything? It is, and it's one of those things, and that's why I kind of actually, this is kind of funny because we're recording afterwards, but I recorded with Nat Cassidy yesterday, and I said to him about how like there's a wide variety of horror in the one genre. Like genre, people call horror genre, and people just associate it all as the same like thing.
Yeah.
And there's so many variations to what horror can be, and I think that some people may pick up Maeve Fly or American Rapture and think they're getting something different than they actually end up getting. And it might be visceral to them. It might be, over the top to them or whatever. But like sometimes you need that. And so I think that your books like Maeve Fly, I might not, and I just ate eggs the other day and I'm still eerie about eggs. And I just talked about to Nat about rest stop making me not want to use public bathrooms. So there's, there's some things in books that do make it stand with you. But I mean, escape the fact that it's the world we live in, the horrible world we live in, and live into some other horrors like American Rapture was a fun experience. I mean, like I said, it's gut wrenching, it's gore filled, it's a new take on, I say a new take, a unique take on post apocalyptic zombie story, pandemic esque story. And but it's also heartwarming. I mean, there's moments in there where you're like, there's survival and family and sacrifice. So it's an all around novel, and that's what I'm trying to get at right there. That it's not just, some people will take the key parts of the book and say it's intense, and take that and be like, oh, I don't want to read this book because of that. There's so much in this book that people should read.
Thank you. I hope so. Like that is what and Maeve was less of this, but I hope moving forward, like I want every book to have like the broadest, kind of color palette possible. Like I want there to always be some humor, some kind of, romance element, a lot of horror, a lot of fear, but also like a lot of hope, you know, and
Yes.
I hope there's like a little bit of all of those things. And I just want to like get people's hearts racing, you know?
Well, and I also feel like it's a unique story. I think we talk a lot with creators on this podcast that you want to do something that's not the same as everybody else, because if you are, then it just gets, you know, blended in with everything else. When you're creating something that CJ Leeds books have this own little flavor to it, it does that. And I think, I mean, I honestly, Chuck Tingle's stuff has been phenomenal in that way. It has this own little
Oh
flavor to it,
yeah.
and you know, Stephen Grant, all these different authors have their own little flavor to it, and you've created a little flavor to your books that I think people will seek out. And again, with the whole wide variety of things that I've mentioned on previous podcasts about horror, is Terrifier, the movies out there to like scare you, gross you out, make you feel things you shouldn't feel, and all that stuff. But there really isn't a, I say story because it's a great, they're great movies in my opinion, but like there isn't a secondary story usually. It's just that like there's story that goes around it to make it so they can make sense to cutting a body in half. But these kind of things have that visceral feeling, but also a story to go along with it. Like the story itself is one thing, and the horrors come along with it. And I think that's what you're good at, and I think that's what people should read into these books.
Thank you. I'm happy it's landing well. This book took me like 10 years on and off to write, and it just like it's so wild. And I look at it and I'm like, oh, it's still not perfect. You know, it's like, but it is. It's just I'm glad I'm glad. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. I want to see her just be like, hey, let's just talk amazing things about your book. But let's talk. So let's go back. You said 10 years. I mean, did things change? Did things get real in a sense when now you have a pandemic that actually hit our everyday lives? Writing a book that features a pandemic of sorts.
Yeah, for sure. When I first was working on this, it was when there was that Ebola outbreak, and like what, you know, a long time ago. And
Mm-hmm.
that I kind of learned a little bit from that. And then I don't know, I think also like I just had to be older to write some of the like non-horror but kind of like human growth parts of this
Mm-hmm.
story. Because I think in many ways in your early 20s, like you're still a teen, like you don't know anything. I didn't know anything at least. So it definitely I'm glad I took the time with this book. But yeah, COVID definitely informed it. The funny thing is the virus stuff and the you know religious kind of like pushback, all of that was in the book.
Mm-hmm.
So it just I got kind of lucky, and literally the only thing that we kind of took from COVID, and we had the vaccine thing in there before. I say we, you know, it's like everybody has a lot of help with their
Yeah.
books with various team members.
Yes.
Takes a village. But the only thing we really used was the name of it. I called it NARS CoV3, uh, which, you know, there have been coronaviruses
Yes.
before,
Yes. Yes.
but I have doctors in my life, so luckily I got to kind of like check a few little things.
Well, it's funny how you mentioned how there has been a coronavirus and also the name of it. Because I mentioned to a coworker in my office, I was like, yeah, you know, it's crazy because March is coming up here. It's the fifth anniversary of like we shut down our restaurant at the brewery where I
Whoa.
work at. And I'm like, holy crap, that's been so long. It feels like it was just yesterday, but it also is insane. It's been 5 years. And I go, and it's funny, actually, we're in basically the fifth anniversary of it in a sense, because it started overseas in 2019. He goes, it did? I go, that's why it's called COVID-19. He's like, oh. I'm like, it would be called COVID-20 if we found the first case was found in 2020, most likely. But it was kind of funny. He's like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's
Ah,
wild. We all became virus experts and also still know nothing about viruses.
and some still deny that it even happened. We're not going to get into
Yeah.
that on here.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's also a timely book for the time of year it's coming out. I think October, where people seek out horror stories and things like that. Again, as myself and yourself and all the people that I talk to about horror is 365 days a year. There isn't just a one holiday on October 31st that you can watch these things or read these things. And so, but I do think that people gravitate towards this. So I feel like, was that just part of the plan, or was it just happened to be that your book's coming out in October?
So so you know it's election year.
Yes.
And I think a lot of other genres tend to pull books
Mhm.
right before an election. And horror, was kind of like, I don't know, it's spooky season, and also, as you said, like horror readers are uh, every day of the year readers. And there is this like catharsis element to horror
Mhm.
that's very important. I think somebody was telling me that horror and comedies tend to sell better in times of like political turmoil. And I thought that was pretty interesting. But it's a bit of a gamble putting a book out, a couple weeks
Yes.
before, an election, or 3 weeks before an election, because it's really like the news cycle. I mean, everybody's going to be thinking and talking about this other thing. But the book turned out to be a little more political than I even
The-
intended it to be. And it is also spooky season. And the book takes place in the fall. I don't know. It just was kind of a nice moment. But it's fun. Like, it's coming out on the same day as some other authors I really, really admire. Chuck Palahniuk has a new book coming out
mhm.
on the 15th. I think Haley Piper's book comes out on the 15th, which I'm really excited about. I'm sure there
Yes.
are others.
Rest. I mentioned Nat's Rest Up.
Oh, is that
Novella
on the
comes out the
15th too?
15th as well. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sweet.
But yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff. Here's the deal. So if the world ends after the election, people will have the book already. So there's that. So you have the benefit of already selling the book to everybody.
Exactly.
And if the world, we have something to read if the world goes, kaput, and we're in post-apocalyptic world. Not that this is the book you want to read in a post-apocalyptic situation, but there's that. But yeah, you're right. The comedy, people probably use comedy to escape what the world is like and the shittiness of the world. And so I feel like the horror is the same way. If I'm going to read something horror, I'm going to read something that's fake horror, fiction horror, and not the real horrors that we live. So I can see that being, being in that time, when the world is shit outside, you want to escape into something else. You obviously don't want to read a political story, like straight up political story, probably during some political turmoil, because that might
Yeah.
hit too close to home. But yeah, I can see that. It's a pretty good thing. But yeah, and obviously there's no like publishing books is probably a nightmare trying to schedule these things anyway. So it's probably like you'll take whatever date they give you anyway.
100%. There's so many factors, and I was originally on a book a year schedule for summer, and then just kind of things change. But
Mhm.
I'm glad. I mean, now I get a summer to write and live life. But
That's
it'll be fun. I'm going to the Midwest on this tour, which is where the book takes place, and get some fall leaves and do the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a book that it's like I said, timely to this time of year in the sense that it's the horror story that again you came out with Maeve Fly in the middle of the summer, so it's not like it has to be in this time of year. But I feel like there's a gravitation towards that. Plus, if someone wants to buy it for someone for Christmas or they want to buy it earlier and those kind of things, it's already out by the time a Christmas gift comes along. So I love that aspect. This time of year, I feel like is one of those great times because it's something new. Same thing with like if I want to buy someone a graphic novel and it comes out in like November, I'm like, oh, perfect. I can get it in November and give it to someone for Christmas, which is a cool, timing wise thing. But American Rapture versus Maeve Fly, for those people who loved Maeve Fly, how would you say it's different to people? Would you say it's the same? Would readers cross over other than the people who are just fans of you?
I would say it's very different. Maeve was a very like self-assured, or I guess I should say like she is, that
Mm,
Maeve's story is not over. But she's a very like self-assured, confident, kind of disruptive force, and and very like sexually confident and aware of things. And then on the flip side, Sophie, my protagonist in American Rapture, is like the most naive, the most sheltered, and is I like the idea that potentially she could one day become somebody like Maeve. Maybe, I don't know. But at least she is in the book becoming somebody much stronger.
yeah.
And it's that moment in life. It's definitely not like a YA book. Like it's like it's an adult book. But it's about kind of like discovering yourself and your place in the world, and also
Mhm,
just like getting rid of anything that doesn't serve you.
mhm,
So I would say vibe is different. However, like to your point earlier, I hope that this sort of like me thing comes through. Like there's a lot of like neon, there's a lot of roadside America, there's a lot of like place is very prominent. Like every
mhm.
book I write I want place to figure um, very kind of centrally. So LA was Maeve, Wisconsin is American Rapture. My third book's the Colorado book. So we're really, I mean, I'm kind of trying to like move across this country that I actually really love and feel like there's a lot to celebrate here in terms of those things.
You're just planning your book tours around these things. You're gonna place a book in like Paris, so you can just go to
There you
Paris and do
go.
a book tour. You're gonna place your books all these places just so you like your publisher. You're like, hey, the book's based there. I probably should go there. We should
You're
probably.
gonna laugh when you see the locations of my next, like, whenever that comes out, like my next four books. None of it, they're certainly not Paris.
It's some random town in North Dakota that you don't. Yeah, but
Ah.
So you mentioned the neon. Like this is the book cover, which I always appreciate. Obviously, timing matters on these things because obviously an arc or a galley copy of things don't always come. The cover's not always done when they come out. It was literally like 3 weeks prior, I had gotten the arc for Pay the Piper, and then they announced the cover, and then they had arcs come out with the cover on it. But like the actual, this is a stunning cover, and it does scream CJ Leede on this. And so yeah, who was the artist? Do you remember?
Carly Janine Mazur, and Carly did the Maeve cover as well. And these
Yeah,
are actually paintings, which is mind blowing to me. These, I guess these
yeah,
paintings still
yeah.
exist somewhere.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then we just really knew that we wanted it to feel like, I kept saying neon Jesus. Like we just get that neon Jesus feeling here. And I think they just knocked it out of the park.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think it screams. As I'm a designer and creative director by trade, so like I'm gonna. It sounds like I'm touting myself, but I do think people do judge books by their cover, and I hate to say that because the inside is so much more important than the cover. But let's be honest, there's so many books at the store when you go to buy it, and you're looking at Barnes and Noble shelves that the most attractive books are going to pull you in first. And so having
Oh,
a
for
really good
sure.
cover is well worth it. And I think that this cover, as well as the Maeve Fly cover, which I don't know, you can't see, but it's back there somewhere. The
And
eyes
that's,
just
I really
polka
should
dot.
shout out Nightfire on this,
Yeah.
and specifically Christine at Nightfire, who kind of like comes up with the cover concepts, because really, like, I didn't even know this artist before. And it's amazing. Like, they just have such a good sense for what's going to work. And it's crazy how at every turn you're like, wow, yeah, everybody is really good at their individual jobs. And I'm so glad that they do them because they're so much better than me at these things.
Well, that's what you said we when you said to making the book, and it's like it's true. It's yes, you are writing the words that are in the inside, but you do have editors, you do have people at the publisher, you
Yeah.
have designers. There's a team that goes into it to make it. I mean, in the end, your name is on the book, and the success and the failure of it does come back mostly on you. But there's a whole team that does work on the book together. So that you're right on that. And Tor's Nightfire has been like I don't know, it's like swing and hit home runs every single book that's come out recently, and it's just phenomenal to see that.
It's crazy. And they were the first horror only imprint at a big five publisher. And now I think there's another coming. And I don't know. I think like I feel so lucky. They're a pretty like visionary
Mhm.
team, and been kind of a dream to work with. It took me so fucking long to like get anybody to say yes to anything I wrote that I don't know. I'm like I would do it all over again just to like land where I did. I
Mhm.
think I really lucked out. Even like you talking about Nat, like
Yeah,
the other writers too. It's just it's a very cool community.
it's a phenomenal, and I like literally. It's so funny too. I don't know if you've ever noticed, like you see a movie and you're like, "Oh, that movie looks so good. I wonder why it's so good." And then you find out the director is a director you've liked of every movie. You're like, that makes sense. Like it connects. It's the same thing. I like read a book and I'll be like, "Who published this book?" And I'm like, "Oh, Tor Nightfire. That makes
Yeah.
sense."
Oh, them.
That checks out, you know. And if honestly, I was just talking to Naz, it's shortwave is the same way now with their novellas. I feel like the same way. If I didn't know it was a shortwave novella, I'd also be like, oh, that checks out. Like this makes sense. And Rest Stop was one of those, and so on. But yeah, it's a book that again, like I said, it's different than Maeve Fly, but still feels like you. Like it feels like you wrote it, and that's obviously important because people do tend to follow publishers. I live in the town that Stephen King lives in, or lives in. And he's made an entire career of people seeing the name Stephen King on his books and been purchased by it. I mean, they're good, but I'm just saying, like, let's be honest, people buy anything that says his name on it at this point.
Oh, are you kidding? Like I'm like lining up at the freaking bookstore like, anytime he's got a release. Yeah, still.
That's why I like would love for him to just straight up write like a really, really, really cheesy romance just to see what happens. Like just throw one out there that's like the most like
New York
Emily
Times
Henry,
bestseller.
like yes, it would be.
Instant. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the fact too that I think some of his more recent books actually are some of my favorites, which is freaking crazy. Like this dude just doesn't let up. Man, what a gift to the world he is.
Yeah, it is. And actually, this week that we're in, that this is going to be releasing, which is October, the week of October or September 30th through October, whatever, 5th. That weekend is the local comic convention here in Bangor, Maine. And we're celebrating the 35th anniversary of the Pet Cemetery movie. And so they have
Sweet.
like the truck, like, or like the tractor trailer truck that runs over Gage. And like Gage is going to be there. The kid is like now like older
Wow.
and he's going to be there, which I didn't know he was actually in the Spawn movie that came out years and years and years ago. But and so they have like 5 or 6 people that were in the movie are going to be here doing like a reunion of sorts in the town that Stephen King uh, wrote the book, I guess, in that sense. So yeah, it's kind of crazy how long of a career, but yeah, just have someone be like 50 books in or so and you'd be like, oh, we're gonna release some bangers out there. I mean,
Yeah.
you like it darker was an insanely good anthology book this year, or short story book I should say, this year, that I put in my top 10 probably list of best horror books of the year. And it's like a bunch of short
Yeah,
stories
it's
that
crazy.
it's insane.
It's crazy. The Institute. I mean, like The Outsider. It's
Yes,
freaking nuts.
it's nuts. So one of these days it's going to be like Stephen King, CJ Leede. They're on the same level.
We'll see. I'll take it.
No, but it's true. I feel like there is that stamp, and I talked to I brought up enough of us on this podcast, but Daniel Kraus, I talked to him. He writes so many different genres of books. Sci-fi. He has a sci-fi book coming out.
Yeah.
He
Oh,
has a World
sweet.
War II book, and horror and all that stuff. And every single one of them still has that thumbprint that was written by that person. I think that's a big thing, and I think that same thing. This is different than Maeve Fly, like you mentioned, but it still has that little flavor of CJ Leede on it, which is phenomenal. And so anybody who did like Maeve Fly, I feel like should like this book, in my opinion.
Thank you. I hope
Yes.
so. I hope so. And I like the idea of like varying the protagonists too.
Yeah.
Like my third book's dual POV, but like really the main character is a man, Like I don't want to just do the same thing over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you get bored, and I think that there's some people who like that when they're some authors write 7 books in a series and they're happy with it, but sometimes you need to have that change of character to keep your mind fresh, and I think that's cool in the same sense. But not that I'm saying I wouldn't take another Mayfly book, but I do
Well,
like the
I
new stuff.
theoretically they're coming, so
But yeah, so the the book itself hits October 15th at your bookstores everywhere, and people can pre-order it. American Rapture. You have a couple more weeks left before this is coming out. What are you nervous? Are you excited? What's your next stage in having people want to get this in their hands? Like, is it just let it roll and you can't help it? It's just what it
I
is, what it
feel
is now.
You know what? Last year before Maeve came out, it was my first book.
Yeah.
I couldn't eat. I was like sick with nerves. And I don't know if this is like if people know this about me or not, but I get very anxious to like speak in front of people. So often and I try to be really professional, but like, sometimes I'll like take a little whiskey shot or
Yeah.
something before, we're writers. It's
Yes.
acceptable, I think.
Yes.
Um, before any kind of public speaking thing. But I'm not really nervous this time. I think it's more like I'm I'm such a merch hoe, and I've commissioned like a lot of merch for this tour that I'm really excited about. So if anybody listening to this wants to come to any of my events, we're gonna have some like event exclusive merch, which I'm really stoked on. We're also throwing a huge party. Speaking of other cool authors and books coming out in the fall, Rachel Harrison, Clay McLeod Chapman, and I have a big New York like kind of book Halloween party on October 30th that we've been
Awesome.
like deep in the planning of. So it's really like it's more like logistics at this point. Like
Mhm.
I'm deeply in the pre-tour logistics. But going on Instagram every day and seeing like, folks reading the book and posting about the book, it's very cool. And your skin gets thicker,
Yes.
like bad Goodreads reviews or bad, like everybody wants to tag you in their 1-star reviews, which
I
is
don't
a wild
understand that. I don't
experience.
understand that. What
Yeah,
do
it's
they
crazy.
expect? Like,
I know.
I do tend to tag people when we post things, about the authors. 4-star writing, right? 5 stars.
Four
Honestly,
and five.
if it's
Four
below a
and five.
5,
That's
there's
it.
no reason to. Because first of all, I
Absolutely.
think 3-star ratings are more like, what's the point? Because it's just in the middle. But yeah, anything below that, I'm like, what are you trying to make these people upset with you? Like, I don't like. They're just going to ignore it anyway. First of all, but like, or maybe not. Maybe it's going to fester with you. But I'm just saying, like, I just don't get the point of it. Like, if you want to tell people it's a 2-star rating, put it on Goodreads or Amazon, whatever you want to do, put it out there. You have the right. It's your free speech.
Yeah.
But like, why tag the person in it? I don't like. I won't even tag the publisher in a book that I don't like. Like, it's not even like. It's like, why tag the person and take them down a notch? I don't know. I got someone who villainized me via email because I didn't like a Stephen King book. We talking about Stephen King. That I wasn't a fan of The Cell. Like, I just wasn't a fan of it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'm a fan of a lot of other books. One of my favorite books of all time is Salem's Lot. And so like I am a fan of Stephen King. But this one, I have the right to not like one of his books. But I also didn't
Yeah.
tag Stephen King in the book. I didn't like
Everyone
tag
has
the
the right. Yeah. I think it's honestly like people just don't really think about like the writers or creators being
Yes.
also people. It's
Yes.
just like sort of this nebulous idea, but it gets to a point where it's funny and you just sort of like laugh it off. And
I mean,
but it is,
it's not the same versus like you rating a restaurant a 1-star. Like a 1-star rating at a restaurant, I hope they change things. Like I hope they like,
yeah.
oh, the server was awful. Da, da, da. Okay, cool. Maybe they'll talk to that server, so on and so
Yeah.
forth. But like American Rapture is done. Like you cannot do anything to American Rapture right now to change it. I guarantee you, it's probably already printed, right? It's probably already at the publisher's
I
warehouse.
think it is. It's probably being printed right now. Additionally, it's like you write a book. A book can take five
Yes.
months to write. It can also take 10 years to write. And then in a best case scenario, somebody reads it in a day or two.
Yes.
Best case scenario, they consume this work that took maybe a decade of your life in a day or two, and then like stick a little review on it, and that's
Yeah.
cool. Like that's what we want. But it's like the funniest thing. It's like, yeah, I mean, that's somebody's life's work.
Yeah.
I feel very like anytime somebody online says anything negative about a galley of a book that hasn't,
Yeah.
like a debut author, if there's a debut author and they've got a galley circulating, anybody who trashes it online, I then feel like I want to just like champion that book forever. Because
Yes.
it's like, you've got to at least let people get the book out in the world and like make their name.
Yes.
Like, so then I'm always trying to be like, hey, everybody read this book. It's awesome.
And it's like we all have our own like I'm a big horror fan, so obviously I'm going to
Yeah.
write a horror book likely higher than I am going to be a romance book because once I read the romance book, it's like it doesn't hit the same feelings to me. Like my wife is a huge romance reader, so she reads romance novels all the time. If I handed her this book, I mean, she would. I bet she'd DNF it. I don't even think she'd finish American Rapture, but that's because it's not her style of book. And so a lot of
Yeah.
some of these people out there who get these galleys that sent to them and they read them, and they're like, "Oh, this is awful." It's like it's the same thing in the beer industry where someone's like, "Oh, this IPA was disgusting." I'm like, "Do you like IPAs?" No. Then why do you think that it's good? Like, obviously it's disgusting. Like, it doesn't taste good to you. But yeah, tagging 1-star reviews. Oh, that's a fun thing. But yeah, and I mean, but you also shouldn't feel pressured to get a galley and write a good review. But there's also ability of
Yeah.
like you not saying anything
You could
either.
just not say it. Yeah, and I would say in general, like if somebody wants to trash my galley, like
Yeah.
sure, like I already have a book out. It's
Mhm.
just when it's a debut.
Yes.
It's like
Yes.
give these folks a shot. It's like their life's work. But
Yes.
I'll tell you what, I to that point about romance, a big complaint I get from readers sometimes is that there's too much romance plotline in my books. And I gotta tell you, like, that's really not stopping. Like,
Yeah.
I freaking love a romance storyline. I like sex in books, and this book had less sex in it, but was more like about
Outside. Yeah.
sex, kind of. But it's like, I don't know. I don't know why it's not. in most books, it's a big part of life, just like death is, or things that we're afraid of, it's like it's pretty common.
It is. I mean, like I've mentioned, my buddy who owns a comic book store that's on. He actually reviewed Swamp Thing with us for this week. That like some of the tropes that are in like horror movies, there's always going to be a pair of boobs in a
Yeah.
horror movie because it's just part of it. So that's just part of like But yeah, you're right. The romance part of things furthers the story a little bit too. But I'm liking how you said the real quickly as we finish up here. But the sex part of it, because yes, there was more sex itself in Maeve Fly and some sexes in this book, but like it's more like I kind of related it to like Walking Dead to people is always you're like I don't like zombies, and it's like well the zombies are a like plot device to move the story along. That it's really about the people, and I think that's the
Yeah.
same thing here. Like the sex is there to move the story along because you need to have that plot point and that narrative, but like the other stuff that goes around is really the important stuff. Like the sex isn't the important stuff in this book.
Yeah, and I think that's really what I was trying to say is like we put young women in this impossible position where we say like your entire value and worth is your like sexual self, and at the same time it's your greatest sin and shame.
Mhm.
And I think like this book was my main character, really kind of like grappling with that and ultimately just deciding, how she wants to live her life with it. And that's kind of like a decision we kind of all have to make in our
Mhm.
puritanical uh, capitalist country.
And I will say, I mean, I've read a bunch of books, and there's a bunch of books out there by male authors that actually have pretty good female protagonists, which are, out there.
Oh yeah.
But I also can say that I'm not a 16-year-old girl. I don't know if you knew that or not, but I'm not. And I still was able to relate in a way that I was surprised that I was able to relate to the main character. Like you're expecting that, as I read it, I'm like, oh, I read the synopsis and you're like, 16-year-old, da, da, da. I'm like, oh, how am I going to relate? But you were able to
Yeah.
relate to someone who's a 30-year-old, straight male. Like I was able to relate to that way. I mean, I did grow up in the church, so there's probably had something to do with it. But like, yeah, my dad's a pastor, so I probably won't be sharing this book with him.
Why not? I mean, it's really,
He would
and
he
I
would
should
read
say
it. He would read it, and he wouldn't judge or anything like that. He'd read it, but I'm just saying, like, he's probably not going to be like going to his church on Sunday morning and be like, "You should read this book." I mean, that would be a
the
pull
day
quote
that
for
he's
the
given out
paperback
his
release.
word.
If you could get a pastor to write a pull quote for the back of the paperback release, there you go. No, but yeah, I was able to relate to her. I mean, it's
I'm so
fun.
glad.
Yeah,
And I hope that, like, I don't mean to say either that this experience is like, solely that of like women. It's like all
yeah,
types of folks end up, kind of like being very heavily affected by any kind of like repressive, weird purity culture, if they have experience with it. So I think it's interesting how it affects different people too, or
mhm.
maybe it just doesn't. Like some people just are fine with it, but I wasn't. So I took 10 years to write this book.
And it's finally coming out. You got two
And it's
weeks
here.
as of this episode releasing. You got 2 weeks till it hits shelves at bookstores everywhere. And like I would always say on this podcast, is try your local bookstore first. But if you can't, just buy the book. Like I know there's
Thank
evil
you.
corporations
Yeah.
out there, but there's buy the book. Like this doesn't the difference between I'm sure you'd be happier someone buying it on Amazon than not buying it all.
For sure. And I will also say, because this is a book like heavily about librarians and
Yeah.
the
Yes.
importance of them, like your local libraries, like even if you can't buy it and just want to read it, like I'm stoked on that. And bookshop.org is also like freaking phenomenal. And Libro
That's
FM. The world
yes.
is making things easy for us in a lot of ways.
Libro FM I'm a big proponent for Libro FM because
Oh yeah.
not outside of the fact that they support local bookstores, but you also own the content. So when you buy
Is that
American
true?
Rapture, yes, it's DRM free. It's
Wow.
yours. So if all of a sudden I know where Libro FM's like we can't do this anymore, they should close up shop, or for some reason Tor Nightfire is like we're not going to put our books on there anymore, or whatever it may be, you can download that file and it's on your computer and it belongs to you, which is a huge thing because if anybody doesn't know anything about streaming or anything like that, like you don't own the content that you buy on these things. If you buy like a movie on Apple and Apple loses Lionsgate's, stuff, then you don't get to watch that movie anymore. So that's a big thing to me. I've had it happen. Like even the free books people get on Audible, like, oh, look at this X-Files book I wanted to read is free. And I put it in my thing and then it's no longer free anymore. I wasn't able to listen to it anymore. And so that's why Libro FM to me is huge because of that. So download if you want to listen to the audiobook, which I am a big fan of audiobooks. Check out Libro FM because they will support your local bookstore, but also you get to own it.
Oh yeah. And sidebar, my audiobook reader, Monica Plant, freaking killed it. So I'm very excited for people to listen.
See, I don't have the patience I love audiobooks, but I don't have a lot of times the patience to wait because the audiobooks are usually out like a month or so before for advanced copies. And so I'm like, oh God. So I read the novel, but like then I think what I need to do is just go back and read it again on audiobook because I think, yes, there is something to say about great narrators as well. So October 15th, CJ, it's right around the corner.
Big day. Everybody got the good releases.
There you
I'm
go.
so excited to celebrate all my friends too. And it's going to be a good day.
And pre-order now, people. This comes out September. This episode drops September 30th. So like pre-order now because
Yeah,
you can still
please.
pre-order and tell your local bookstores you want it, whatever. I hate to, I love to reiterate a lot of places that you pre-order online too, they don't actually charge you till they ship it. So even if you don't have the funds in your account, you can still pre-order it now, and then they'll charge you for it when they ship the item out. So like just pre-order it, people. I highly
Also,
recommend it.
oh, thank you. And also, I'll say I posted this on Instagram, but in order to kind of like celebrate librarians, and it's Banned Books Week right now,
Mm-hmm.
I decided that any hardcover, like pre-ordered or sold within the first week of pub, so up until like October 22nd, for every one of those somebody buys, I'll donate $1 to Unite Against Book Bans.
Mm.
So that's like my one little way to try and celebrate the libraries and everything they give to us because they're super important.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. And also putting something around it and getting people to buy it in the first week. I think that's a huge, I think some people are like, I'll get it when I get it. It's a huge thing, honestly, for an author to get pre-orders because it tells the publishers that, the book's going to be popular. And then the first week sales does a lot towards your charts and all that. Makes people legitimize you as an author. And I think that's a good thing. And then adding this bonus to it is pretty cool in my opinion. So I'm happy about that. So American Rapture, October 15th. Happy horror season, CJ, right?
Thank you. You too. We are in it.
It's right here. And so I'm glad you were able to take time out of your day to stop on here early on the West Coast there to talk to us. I say early. I've been up since like 4:30 because I have a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old, but that's so it's a bit a
That's
long day
wild.
already for me.
You're
But
amazing.
but I'm glad you were able to take time out and come on here, and we'll get you back on the next time you have a book that comes out. But happy haunting and horrors and all that stuff. I'm hoping that this book release is phenomenal for you. And you have some amazing tour dates with some amazing co-guests on those tour dates that are phenomenal too. You mentioned one, but like there's
Oh yeah, and
Chuck Tingle.
Chuck Tingle
Obviously
and I
Chuck
are
Tingle.
kicking it off here. Oh yeah, we are gonna light up Burbank like a fucking disco ball. There are gonna be so many sequins between the two of us. Like folks should just show up for the fashion show.
That to me is like get on a plane, fly from the East Coast to Burbank worthy kind of thing. If I had the funds or I didn't have a wife and 2 kids at home, I might get on a plane to be flying to Burbank to see that. Because you know what? I will say Bury Your Gaze is one of my favorite books that came out this year as well. So I
It's
tell you that
insane, right?
it's phenomenal.
It's
So
like one of my favorite books of all time now.
and
I speaking of X-Files, oh
yes,
man, it's so good.
it's so good.
Everyone
So
read that.
So buy that now and go and read
Yeah,
it, and then go buy or then pre-order while you're there. Pre-order the October 15th release of American Rapture, and why don't you throw in there Rest Stop for you and all the other books that are coming out on that day too.
absolutely.
Just take a small loan out. Your guys are fine. I really appreciate again, like I said, I really appreciate you coming on, and best luck to the release. And we're excited for everybody to read it. Thanks,
Thank
CJ.
you so much.